before you leave, if you want to check it out, over here, we have a lot of Stars and Stripes and U.S. Soldier magazine from the time of Operation Market Garden through the Battle of the Bulge. The handouts tonight, I actually got them to photocopy. This is the Stars and Stripes edition, the paper, when Patton's Third Army makes it into Bastogne, and it shows some fancy brand new weather gear our soldiers would have loved to have had fighting throughout the Bulge. This one is propaganda fired over by German artillery pieces. It was a Christmas card for the besieged armies, letting them know the latest possible date that if they shot themselves or got wounded, they could make it home in time for an American Christmas to try and break through the Bulge. And then my favorite is a letter that 101st Airborne General Anthony McAuliffe wrote to the soldiers on Christmas Day, informing them of his response to the German request for their surrender. It was a famous one-word anecdote where he wrote nuts. And so this is the message he wrote to the men to keep their morale up. So the Battle of the Bulge. Whoops. Hey, what's going on, guys? All right. Battle of the Bulge is one of those things you hear a lot about it, and a few people understand. You know, they may have heard of Bastogne, they may have heard of the tanks, but a lot of people only know half the story. The Battle of the Bulge does not end when the siege of Bastogne is lifted. That was, in fact, almost the first third of the battle. It will continue on till the end of January, if not into February 1945. This was the largest set-piece battle that the American Army ever took place in World War II. It's just a nasty, tight, confined area. If you would go there as an adult, the area is just breathtakingly beautiful. Part because it is pretty, but it's very quiet. There's like nothing there. It's like a time warp. If you go there 70 years ago or today, things look pretty much the same in a lot of areas. So, Battle of the Bulge. We're going to pick up where we left off last week with Operation Market Garden. There's that nasty estuary coming into the port of Antwerp in Belgium. It is going to be the target for Adolf Hitler, but it is also crucial to the American supply line. We are still dealing with that problem. Gasoline, ammunition, essential equipment must get forward. Because of the success in July and August, General Omar Bradley put the hold on what he thought were unnecessary equipment coming ashore. Coats, toboggans, mittens, boots. L.L. Bean designed a boot especially for frontline soldiers in the Low Countries. It was a rubber boot insulated with rabbit fur that went up to the knee. Frontline soldiers never got those because they were still out in the North Sea, and when they did come ashore, it was the supply troops that took them. So, you know, supply officers, cooks were nice, snug, and warm, and guys are out front in the Ardennes forest in a fall jacket, freezing to death. Canadian troops, engineers, and commandos are another group that's very bitter at our good friend Bernard Law Montgomery because they feel that he did not give them priority. They were always tertiary while he was focused with the Guards Armored Division going up to the Remagen Bridge. After that fails, he needs to find, you know, an outlet for his anger and his energy. And Antwerp is the big port. He wants his guys to capture it. Well, the Canadians had been fighting there for months, but they needed equipment. It was all going to Monty. He finally gives it to them. And this guy, Guy Simmons, Canadian Royal Marine gets the job of clearing the estuary. Now, it's kind of narrow, and on either side of the estuary, into the hillsides, the Germans dug what was a miniature of D-Day. Artillery pieces, barbed wire, landmines, all of it under the water and in the tidal pool. So as the Canadians go in, they're just massacred. There was no way to flank it. There was no way to airdrop it. You had to hit it head on. And so a new machine, a buffalo tractor, which is, it's like a tank with no top on it. It was an armored personnel carrier, was designed to bring in and assault the German positions. Of the 25 that go in, here's a buffalo tractor. It wasn't thin plywood, it was heavy, thick steel, but it wasn't very swift. It could carry between 15 to 25 soldiers. This is the end of the estuary, the estuary coming out to the North Sea, England over there. The 25 that go in the final assault, only 4 make it back. 150 guys go in, 13 survive the final attack. So the Canadians are bitter that they were given equipment late. They had the upper hand momentum early on. Montgomery supplies in Market Garden robbed them of their opportunity, so they are massacred. While the port is captured, the Germans destroy it. So even though it's captured, it's of little use to the supply chain coming into the winter of 1944, which winds up being the coldest recorded winter in northwestern Europe in the 20th century. So it was the wettest summer, it was the coldest winter. And sitting right on the edge is the beautiful city of Aachen. Now Aachen carries a lot of historical weight to it. It was completed by Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne in the year 800. The first look at a unified Central Europe since the fall of the Roman Empire. Charlemagne is crowned Holy Roman Emperor on Christmas Day in the year 800. And he has Aachen built as a new Rome. He's going to rebuild and resurrect the Roman Empire. It was what Hitler referred to as the First Reich. So this has a lot of historical German mythology to it. So, closest to it was United States General Courtney Hodges, one of Omar Bradley's top commanders in the First Army. His counterpart was a guy named Gerhard von Schwerin. And Schwerin knew the historical importance of the city. He figured it was lost. Rather than have the city destroyed, he and his men pulled eastward, east and south, down into a nasty forest called the Hurtgen Forest. The United States General Lightning Joe Collins gets to Aachen and he goes around it. His job was to punch through the Siegfried Line before the Germans got there. He was almost to it and he runs out of gas. So Joe Collins is beyond Aachen, Schwerin is going south, and the city is just sitting there, a big, giant medieval city. Well, Hitler loved Aachen. To him, it was kind of the heart and the soul of his empire. And he brings Prussian troops, crack SS troops, from Prussia, and he says, defend Aachen, the sacred city, to the last man. So after Market Garden, Eisenhower tells Bradley, look, that failed, it's screwed up, you and Patton get moving, stay together on a broad front, and bulldoze your way to the Rhine River. Standing right smack dab in front of Omar Bradley was the city of Aachen. And Collins gets there, and he will pretty much surround it. He turned around from one side, and Courtney Hodges came from the other, and asked, look guys, if you don't surrender, we're Americans, we'll simply blow up your city. You do not want us to blow up your sacred city. Well, being Waffen SS, they didn't. So there will be a nasty month-long battle for the city of Aachen. And on the outskirts, the houses were stone, kind of like condominiums, row houses. as the American troops advanced down the middle of the narrow alleyways, you'll see in a second, they were easily machine guns. The machine guns would set up at intersections and just mow everything down. So we were thinking, we can't get tanks in here, it's too narrow. So a brand new shoulder-fired bazooka, much better than the one we had early in the summer, was introduced. And GIs would simply go to one end of a block and shoot the bazooka through the different concrete walls and travel down the roadway through everybody's houses and come out behind the Germans. So the ancient city of Aachen was virtually destroyed. The Germans will fall back to the cathedral. Now the cathedral is beautiful, it's right smack dab in the center, and about 80% of it survives the attack. Once the Germans fell back to the cathedral, it was pretty much game, set, match, but not before the cathedral takes several hits. And so this medieval city, dating back to 800, was pretty much razed to the ground. If you go there today, it is still beautiful, but it's very easy to see like the difference between the old medieval stuff and the stuff that's 70 years old. Pretty much the whole thing had to be rebuilt. So this is the city of Aachen. You'll see a modern picture of this here in a second. This is the cathedral. It is here, that Charlemagne was crowned emperor. All 39 Holy Roman emperors were crowned right here. The back wall caved in. But inside the cathedral are the remains of Charlemagne. It's how we know he was like 6'10". And it's also a bunch of, from the medieval ages, religious artifacts. I believe part of the crown of thorns from the crucifixion is there, and part of, Virgin Mary's cloak is supposedly in Aachen Cathedral. So here it is today. There's Julius Caesar right there. And, right, this road here is very close to this. So you can see it's all brand new and built very narrow on an old walkway. It's still gorgeous, but it's kind of like fakey, kind of like, like Universal Studios, because it's not, it's not what it once was. So anyway. Here is the outside of the cathedral. This is the two steeples remained intact. It is this far wall on the other side, which you can't get to, caved in. So it is the original cathedral. Everything else, three sides of it are intact. The entire rest of the town is completely leveled to capture the city of Aachen. So we have that. All right. Next is one of those things that just defy, like the old joke about military intelligence. Why take this path? And after that, the army has got to get to the Roer River, R-O-E-R. And in order to get there, it has to cross this low floodplain that leads to the Rhine River. But way up above the Roer River is a bunch of mountains surrounded by a forest. And there are two dams built in to the north side of the forest. You can't see them until you're right on top of them. Two giant dams that hold back the melting snow from northern Europe. And it's in this thick, nasty forest that the United States Army is ordered, going down the valley into the forest, which was just a sunken, nasty quagmire. The target are the two dams way up on top. Well, we felt that they were too strongly guarded, so instead of going for the prize, we decided to outflank the Germans and go to the low-lying forest called the Hurtgen Forest. And we're getting into November. It begins to rain. The weather turns cold. The ground turns into a soupy, muddy quagmire. You just can't move through it. And that's where our soldiers were ordered. The Germans were told, Waffen-SS, defend those two dams until the bitter, bitter end. So, soldiers who survived the Hurtgen Forest say the cold of Bastogne was horrible, but the fighting in the Hurtgen was even worse. The only problem is There aren't too many guys who lived through the Hurtgen that made it through the Bulge. It was a veritable meat grinder. Yes, ma'am.
Who made that decision? Was that an Eisenhower decision?
That was an Omar Bradley decision. It was Omar Bradley. The rain, sleet, mud, nasty living conditions, and soldiers will tell you that as you'll see the Hurtgen here in a second, visibility was down to yards, like 20 feet to 30 feet. You're looking at 10 yards, about from me to the wall. And as you're crawling through the forest, everything looks the same. It's green, it's enchanted, it's muddy. And the Germans had been there, whoops, for quite a long time. Oh, did I just die? What just happened? All right, well, all right, let's go old school on here. So here we have, my battery's died. Here we have Aachen. Instead of going straight up here to the Roar River dams, we descend into this area. And it is just, if you go there to, oh, now it starts to work. If you go there today and you get motion sick, I would describe it as driving up I-77 through West Virginia, but make that 4 lanes a 1.5 lane, like tiny little road. And it's up and down and twisting and turning. You're not going to be able to go very fast. Yes, you'll think you're cool. You're in a standard transmission. You can really grind through the gears, but you're going to go about 25 miles an hour. And you're also rubbernecking. So, you got to be very careful. So we go down, around from Aachen, straight down into this area right here. Let's see if this works now. There we go. There are no roads, nothing like tanks, and even the Jeep that was supposed to be all-terrain couldn't go through the Hurtgen. It becomes a foot soldiers and infantrymen's battle going into this area. Now this forest is so dark and so old that this was the inspiration for Grimm's fairy tales, like Hansel and Gretel. You go in there, it's scary, it's dark, there's evil things lurking in the woods. And the soldiers, when they came upon each other, like literally almost stumbled upon one another. The Germans sat and waited, and we had to seek out and find them. The Germans had machine guns camouflaged in concrete. The other thing that makes this area so horrible is part of it was the old Hindenburg line from World War I. So you're walking over the World War I-ish terrain that's interlaced, now a bigger, stronger defensive network, and you'll see in a second, problem with this area, as wet and soupy as it is, the freeze and thaw over the years causes ordnance to pop up out of the ground. Some of it today is World War I, and some of it is World War II, just lying around everywhere. So the Germans, once they knew where we were, could call in accurate artillery coordinates. And the Germans at this time will use a tree burst, a shell designed to blow 12, 15, 20 feet in the air, so the cone of shrapnel comes down like an umbrella. It maximizes the damage, so even hiding in a foxhole isn't going to save you. Plus it blows up the pine tree. So you have those thick pine splinters whirling around, so it's not metal shrapnel, it's wood, it's falling down on you. You get disoriented, everything looks the same. If you retreat, you run into a machine gunner, and so soldiers were taught to hug a tree. The best thing you can do is get up to the base of a big pine tree and bury yourself into it. And more guys are fed into this. And nothing outside of the hedgerows was more World War I-ish than fighting in this forest. It was an objective that didn't need it to be attacked. The dams up top, getting the forest without the dams is worthless. The Germans would just flood them. You have to get the dams, and instead we go into the forest. So it takes until December 9th. It's taken almost a month to clear the Hurtgen Forest. The only way to take them was to make the Germans retreat. And the Germans now know their back is to the wall. We're inside Germany. Not over the Rhine, but on the outskirts. Every step they go backward, the closer the Allied armies are coming to home. So you're fighting not just to survive now, you're fighting for your home. Also, the guys over here, some of the Wehrmacht guys are down south. These are Waffen SS. These are fanatical, Hitler Youth trained, hardened-core Nazis. They're not just going to give up. You've got to capture them or you've got to kill them. The month cost the United States 29,000 United States casualties, plus 5,000 cases of trench foot. And trench foot, so many cases were reported during the sloppy mess of the Hurtgen. Upper command, Eisenhower and Sir Arthur Tedder, felt that it was, guys were doing it on purpose to get pulled off the line. So reporting a case of trench foot was dereliction of duty. You were GI, your military property, you weren't taking care of your feet, therefore you could be disciplined. So guys who were getting trench foot all of a sudden didn't want to admit it because they didn't want to get in trouble. Problem is they had no ability to keep their feet dry, and you're in knee-deep mud and rain. So 8 divisions are mangled. February 1945, there were still some Germans, werewolves, hiding in the Hurtgen. We lost 550 tanks to artillery and Panzerfausts in the Hurtgen in February when we were well beyond, already through the Battle of the Bulge. So this here is my favorite Hurtgen photograph. Just thick, dense woods. The deeper you go into it, the darker it is. You're 5 yards from your buddies, and if you get any farther than that, you're not going to be able to find them. A lot of historians like to call the Hurtgen the equivalent of the American Civil War battle of the wilderness. This was worse. The forest was bigger, it was more dense, and the weather was way worse than it was in 1864. So here you have 2 GIs hiding behind brush. Just on the other side are German soldiers. Their camouflage was incredible. So this is part of a World War I, World War II German machine gun bunker in the Hurtgen Forest. It's just sitting right there. Slabs of concrete, you throw some dirt and grass on it. This one is 70 years old, this one is 100. It's World War I-ish. But to the Germans, why rebuild something if there's something already there for us to use? And here's laying around over there is unexploded ordnance. So as GIs were digging or trying to dig a foxhole, they may come across unexploded ordnance. The stuff is literally in this area, the World War I, World War II area, laying around to this very day. Stack of World War II artillery and a World War I artillery shell laying there. No, I did not touch it. People were wondering. I got close. Wanted to bring it home, but my wife would get really mad, so I wasn't allowed to do that. So anyway, so yeah, well, how can I get this in carry-on? I don't know. Check it on, but anyway. So this leads up to the fortress cities of Verdun in the Metz. And Verdun, talk to someone, English, French, German, especially French and German, will evoke this horrific visions of the massive battle in World War I that will claim 3 million lives. World War I, the French actually wrote a song. When your division is sent up to Verdun, you say farewell to wine, farewell to women, farewell to France, because you knew you were going to die. And what makes the city of Verdun and its sister city, the Metz, so difficult is they were World War I fortress cities that were interconnected. So medieval stone built with modern concrete encasements. Part of the old Maginot line on the other side is the Siegfried line. So it's a giant wall of concrete. And Patton has been down south, just chomping at the bit. Mother of pearl frickin', I told you idiots that Montgomery was going to screw it up. We weren't going to be able to get through. I'm 10 miles and I'm waiting for some gasoline. So as a result, he gets his leash is lengthened a little bit, and he is told to get into Germany. And he heads for the old medieval city of Nancy, which he slowly through market garden was able to cobble enough resources together to capture. Eisenhower was squeezing those supplies, but now that he's got Nancy, Eisenhower's like, well, go get Metz. Problem is, this is the bottom end of a massive fortress system consisting of 35 different interlocked concrete forts, the biggest and the largest of which is Fort Drian. And it is right smack dab in front of Patton. And here is where, as much as I like George and his great run across France was awesome, here's where his stubbornness doesn't pay off. He wanted Fort Drian and he was going to get it, and he didn't care what it took. And his aggressiveness was in part because, you know, if you're like me, I hate to stop and start. When I'm working, just keep going. I'll take a break when I'm done. Well, all that momentum he had in August and September crossing the Seine River and getting there, he had to stop. And so he wanted to get his men going again. Speed, speed, and more speed. Problem is, Patton was in this area in World War I. It's where he was shot in the leg back in 1918. He should have known better. A headlong attack into this terrain is not going to work. The Germans and the French tried it for 3 years, and it cost 3 million lives. So how is it going to work this time? But it's his ego. He wants this. He feels that he was sidelined for a year. Yes, he knocked the helmet off the soldier in Sicily, but by God, I'm the best we got. Let me loose, and I will end this thing. Problem is, the days of chasing that beaten, retreating German army are gone. They've had time to stabilize, reinforcements are brought forward, and things are not going to be as easy. And the weather was just nasty. And Hitler will write to Eisenhower, he says, by God, Ike, as much as I love France, when the final draft of this war is over and the surrender terms are written out, I want you to make sure the Germans get Lorraine. Because I can think of no worse punishment than a country having to care for this miserable, nasty mud pit where the only thing of value is how big your dung heap is. So, right? So Patton clearly hates Lorraine. It's not his first choice. Joan of Arc regardless. Also, George C. Marshall is coming over. All right, Chief of the Army. And Patton and Marshall were old friends. And Patton knew that, Eisenhower and Marshall saved his job. So he wants to look good and give Fort Drian and Metz to Marshall when he arrives. So Patton tells subordinate Walton Walker, you take Metz regardless of the casualties. Now this is Patton-esque. What he doesn't realize is, normally, regardless of the casualties, we win pretty quickly and it's going to be okay. This time, it doesn't happen. After 4 bloody assaults and subordinate commanders refusing to attack, even standing toe-to-toe with Patton, he realizes this must not be as easy as I thought. And so he gives that quote, by God, these soldiers are in there fighting. We roll across France in less time than it takes Monty to say regroup, and here we are stuck in the mud of Lorraine. It's where he says, make sure the Germans get this miserable piece of garbage when the war is over. And so he loses his temper, he lashes out, he complains about the weather and supplies and tanks and piecemeal attacks, and nobody's doing what I want, because we're going to take Metz. All right? And if you're on Patton's staff, you just got to get ready and take it. So this is coming out of the Hurtgen, and this is Metz, coming up a narrow little valley looking at this. And the problem with it is, in order to get into it, there are only these tiny little steel doors. The whole thing is solid concrete with firing portals out of it. And surrounding it were little, like mushrooms or turtle shells, where artillery would come up on a hydraulic lift, or machine guns would pop up. And you couldn't see them because they were perfectly camouflaged. You could shoot this with a tank. 105 millimeter howitzers were brought in, and it didn't do anything. It cracked the concrete, but we couldn't get in. And inside was a warren's den of tunnels and holes. And as GIs would go up to scout out, putting TNT on doorways didn't even blow them off, they would get trapped and surrounded by Germans. So finally, a small squad gets up on top. They find a ventilation hatch. They open it up, throw grenades down in, and they climb in. And they're not seen for almost 2 weeks. Patton is, for his 59th birthday, wants this prize. Guys enter on November 22nd, and they're screaming and shouting, and more guys are fed in. And if you would go there today, the guides shut the lights off, and he had like a paper like lunch bag. And he shut the lights off and said, stand here, and he took it and went boom! And just the pop of a paper bag was deafening. The ceilings are very low, the hallways are very tight and narrow, and they're baffled. So around each corner is several 90-degree angles, so an explosion can happen there, and if I stand here, I'm going to be okay. So the soldiers went in. M1s were too big. So it was 45s, it was knives, it was entrenching tools, and it becomes a massive, like old Paleolithic caveman brawl, room to room, hallway to hallway, strong point to strong point, screaming, cussing, bad air, you can't see, no fresh water, you have guys screaming, guys dying, you don't know who's who, you got your little flashlight, and the whole thing takes about 2 weeks. Some of the fighting is like punches, elbows, breaking arms, necks. It was just the most like vicious violence that you can imagine. You either do it or you're not getting out. Germans couldn't retreat, and we couldn't find out a way out alive unless you killed your way through. It's really the only way to say it. There it is again. Fort Driant finally falls. It's December 13th when the last stronghold is completely eradicated. The German general, Herman Bulge, heavily criticizes Patton. He goes, we were under-equipped, small numbers of men, we should have been taken, but your attacks were not coordinated. American ineptitude cost you a lot of lives. Had you attacked us 2 or 3 weeks earlier, we couldn't have stopped you. And that drives Patton insane, because he feels that he's being ripped on. I mean, I'm inept. I could have taken it 3 weeks ago, but I was told no. And Patton loses a lot of men here. Go over to this part of France, Germany today, you can't miss them. They are everywhere. This is called Fort Domom. This is the farthest northernmost point, and it is France's Arlington Cemetery today. And doesn't look that big here, but these are like airplane hangars. They are enormous. And it is the northernmost part of this entire fort system that runs for miles southward, 35 interconnected of these everywhere. Blowing through tons and tons of reinforced concrete and nasty muddy weather was not a good idea. And this is what we do between Market Garden and December. A few weeks earlier, guys were making plans. We're going to move to Japan. War will be over by Thanksgiving. Latest Christmas time. We got this. But Market Garden, Hurtgen, the Mets just grind up American soldiers. Here is where one of the nastiest things, one of the worst things we did, of all of our coordination and logistics, building equipment, training men and women, shipping them to the Pacific or to Europe, we did an incredible job. One of our worst ideas is known as the replacement depot, more commonly known as a rebel depot. And it was a way to feed soldiers into this meat grinder. Normally, you enlist, all right, or you're drafted, and you go through boot camp and training, and all 30 of us are together. We know each other. We know each other's names. You can recognize each other by sight. You're from Chicago. You're from New York. You're from Missouri, whatever. And you would go into combat together, so you have a little bit of bond. You have some familiarity with the person next to you. Well, such was the need for soldiers, as now you came ashore in France, there was really no rhyme or reason to how you were distributed. You were taken in squad or platoon or company. It was the deck of the ship that you were on, or your last name, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1s go there, 2s go there, 3's there, 4's there. So you were separated from the guys that you knew. And you went in and you got processed. Here's your number. You're going to go here. You're going to go over there. You're going to Nancy. You're going to Metz. You're going to Mormilan, where you show up scared, 18 to 20 years old. You don't know anybody. You're in a foreign country. You're looking at dead and wounded getting shipped back to England. You see veterans laying around, you know, with a 1,000-yard stare. And you go into like a tent. And when your number was called, you go into battle. And the best example I use, that kind of show it in the movie Fury, I think, where you're sitting in a room, a tanker comes in, all right, I need 5 men for a tank crew. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, come with me. Well, sir, I don't know how to drive a tank. Well, you got a half hour to learn, soldier, let's go. You might not have been trained to be a machine gunner, an artilleryman, a tanker, but you are now. Your skill, your aptitude didn't matter. You go where you were needed. And this comes at it's a weird time. When England, when France, when Germany are scraping the bottom of the barrel, Germany is creating the Volkssturm, the home guard. It was convicts, it was old men, it was guys from insane asylums were being armed to defend Germany, the last reserve of soldiers. We were taking our best and brightest young men. Back in America, so you have the real smart guys this time are either going to go to the Navy or the Army Air Force. Well, if you enlisted and on your aptitude test you had a high enough score, you would be sent into the ASTP program, like engineers, mathematicians, smart guys. These are our, our senior class president, chess club members, mathematicians, smart guys. Going to be groomed to be leaders. If you sign up to become an officer, your college tuition and part of your classes will be paid for. It's the impetus, the nexus of what will become eventually the GI Bill. Well, all of a sudden, through the fall, we lose thousands of guys. Instead of getting deadbeats off the street, hey, we got all these smart guys in college classes. Fellas, class dismissed, get on a train, we're sending you to Benning, or we're sending you to Bragg, or we're sending you to Fort Hood. We send our best and brightest into this meat grinder, losing future leaders, businessmen, politicians, teachers, professors, you name it, while everyone else was bringing in their last reserve. Simply sent them in because we needed manpower. And you have this young kid, and he comes in. Imagine, I always talk about it with high school students, imagine it's like May. We're getting ready to get out of school, and a new kid transfers in from California, New Jersey, whatever. And I always ask them, is anybody going to learn his or her name? I'll probably call him New Kid, because I'm only going to know you for 4 weeks, so I clearly, sorry parents. Parent, whatever, New Kid, California, sit down and shut up. Right? Where am I going to sit? Well, if you can find an empty seat, sit there. And the veterans, you got to kind of understand what they're saying is, why get attached to this kid? He's going to die soon anyway. I could teach him what I know. I could teach him to hug a tree or to hug the ground. But if I invest that time and I get to know him and he gets killed, it's going to hurt. So I've become hard. I've become callous. If he dies, whatever, it's the new kid. I don't know who it is. So they're sent in without knowing anybody, without proper training. and the veterans didn't warm to them right away. The big joke was, if you're here 24 hours from now, we'll consider you a veteran. That is what is happening right as the Battle of Bulge is about to take place. 45 minutes. We can do this. All right. Hitler is looking at this. He's survived his assassination attempts. He doesn't trust his officer corps. He is in the Führer bunker in the Reichschancellery in Berlin, trying to micromanage everything, poring over maps, troop movements. He's going to quarterback this one himself. And so he looks at his strategic situation. Going back to Otto von Bismarck, 1860 says we cannot fight a war on two fronts. France we can take, Russia hopefully, but we can't fight them both at once. Well, Kaiser Wilhelm didn't listen to that. And if you look at this point where Hitler's fighting, he's fighting on the Eastern Front. He's now fighting in Germany, Norway and Denmark. He's in the Mediterranean. He's in the Atlantic. The skies over Germany with the bombings. He's fighting on 4, 5, 6 fronts. He's spreading guys everywhere, slowly getting shoved back. He knows the only chance he's got is to make peace with the Western Allies. Reason with them, maintain some part of his Third Reich Empire, because there's no negotiating with the Soviets. That time has come and gone. We've broken out of Normandy. The Soviets are coming across Poland. It's only a matter of time before they get here. His plan: defeat the Allied armies, conclude peace there, and then pull everybody to the Eastern Front to deal with the Soviets. Neutralize one front and hang on to the other. And hopefully we can pull this off. So what we know as the Battle of the Bulge is known in Germany as Watch on the Rhine. And so what's going to happen? Antwerp is the objective, the old Scheldt estuary. This red line is the dividing line between British troops in the north and American troops in the south. And what Hitler wants to do is pop out of the Ardennes forest, a forest very similar to the Hurtgen, but except in a floodplain, it's mountains. No one goes through there. Going back to Charlemagne's time, no one goes through there. Julius Caesar said, the heck with attacking to the Rhine River. I can't get through here. So if he can't do it, why would anybody bother? The only guy to do so was Erwin Rommel in 1940. It's where he attacked and was known as Operation Sicklecut and destroyed the French and British army and forced the British to evacuate on the beach of Dunkirk. Hitler says, we did it once, we'll do it again. We'll shove the British back up to the beach, we'll either kill them or they'll have to surrender. Roosevelt is a sick old man. He's going to die soon. Churchill is falling out of favor in England. If we can drive that wedge, they'll quit. But it's going to take speed. We're going to have to hit this hard. We're only going to get one shot. And so this area from here, here's Aachen, here's the Hurtgen Forest. You come down here and you get into the Ardennes. And there are these famous towns, Malmedy, Saint-Vith, Houffalize, Bastogne. All of those are in a road called Skyline Drive that sits about halfway up on this giant ridge. And so this is the area we are going to talk about. From here to here is about 60 miles. A 60-mile wide gap in the middle of these woods that is going to be lightly held. Going back to the rebel depots, new armies were brought over and put in front of this area because it was mountainous. It's winter time is coming. Nobody attacks in the winter. We can take these rookies, take them out on a patrol, let them see some artillery fire, hear some machine gun, and season the cast iron before they really get into combat. So Hitler has got to grind up this area and prove to the Allies that fighting to the Rhine River is not worth it. It's going to cost you too many men, so don't do it. And the attack comes through an even more densely and darker wooded landscape than the Hurtgen, but it's got more mountains. Motorized columns, a 55-ton tank shouldn't be able to get through here. But Hitler says we can. In 24 hours, if we get through the woods and we get to these main roads, we will crush the Allied armies. Jump off is set for December 16th. And there were Belgium and citizens of Luxembourg that were going back and forth that were reporting to the Americans, look, the Germans are building stuff up over there. We hear tanks and jeeps and no, those are phonograph records. The Germans are trying to scare us. No, my cousin or my Aunt Greta or Martel lives over there. I was just there for the holidays for, St. Nicholas Day, and we saw them. They've got all kinds of stuff. And the response from Courtney, Hodges and Troy Milton was, no, the Germans can't have that stuff. And if you look at German war production, going up to the end of 1944, after all the bombings and everything else that had taken place, December of 1944 was where German war output was at its all-time high. It was maximized. So a whole brand new generation of tanks, of tank destroyers, of artillery, of machine guns are going to be built and outfitted just for this attack. 7 German armored divisions walked on the Rhine, Watch on the Rhine was put together in complete and total top secret. 3 guys knew the entire plan. Hitler, out of retirement, who was fired, was Gerd von Rundstedt. He was old, he was still well respected. The German Wehrmacht liked him. The other guy is our old friend, Mr. Monocle, Walter Mogul himself. Can't stand Mogul. They knew the overall plan, and they were asked to handpick a small number of officers to help pull this off. You get the pick of the litter. Everyone has got to be a #1 draft pick. This is what we need. And the all-star squad they come up with is Sepp Dietrich, who's going to lead the 6th Panzer, Hasso von Manteuffel. And he is an interesting guy, skinny little guy, very similar to Bernard Law Montgomery. But he is the most highly decorated German field marshal in the entire war. He fought from Poland into Russia, North Africa, all the way through. So, and a German war medal is the Knight's Cross, and then you get like oak leaf clusters. If you're big time, you get swords, and if you're super big time, you get diamonds. It's like winning multiple congressional medals of honor. Manteuffel, because of his exploits in tank warfare and leadership, has oak leaves, swords, and diamonds. And the last guy is Erich Brandenburger. They draw up a plan, same thing that Rommel did, through the same area, but it's the speed that counts, because the Germans have everything. They've got tanks, they've got trucks, they've got men, they've got ammunition. One key component they don't have. Anybody know what it is? Gas. All right? So we don't have enough gas. But we know from the Americans, they've got a whole crap load of it. So if we can get to their supply dumps and grab their gas, we can do it. So no matter what, don't fight for small pockets of resistance. Blow through them and keep going. Our follow-up stormtrooper infantry will take care of that. You just go. And Manteuffel is supposed to head for Brussels, and he is going to guard the southern flank.